Just before the show starts, I thought I'd give you a little recap of what's been going on. I've not really been making stuff because I've cut my finger open, so I can't skin stuff. And before that, I was working on the new book, 50 Ways to Torture a Sloth, which is out now, but I bring it up in the show anyway, obviously. But things will be getting slowly back to normal. I'll be skinning more stuff soon once my finger's healed. But until then, share the shows, spread videos around. The YouTube videos. I've been making YouTube compilations and things like that. But, I've been trying to do other bits that don't involve putting my hand inside of a dead rat so that I don't get infected. But I have restocked the website with some new stuff, and there'll be probably more new stuff every time you listen to this, I would imagine. But if you're listening to this the week it's gone out, I have finally restocked the website. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the show. This one's it's quite good. It's about dragons, stories about dragons and that. You're right, guys. I'm the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM, and this week we're going to be looking at something that seems to bind the past, the present, the future, whilst also seeming to transcend the known laws of physics entirely. Said to be both the cause of and downfall of humanity at least once. And if I'm right about what they seem to be related to, or at least allegorical for, could easily return again as early as next week and just repeat the process, mate. There's loads of them as well. There's loads of them all over certain parts of Asia, and they seem to have made their way around the world as well, which is worrying. They could be outside or next door for all we know. With they've got the bushy beards, those long fingernails, aggressive natures, and according to some, an affinity for certain types of metals. And it's a wonder we haven't covered them already, to be honest, because this time I thought we could have a little look into dragons, but let's have a song to get us going. This is Heat 7 by Papoose and Method Man. Now, as with most things in the world, the myth about the dragons appears at a glance to have been made in China, and most people would associate the Chinese, and especially ancient Chinese stories with dragons, but dragons actually seem to stem, like a lot of things actually stem from, ancient Iraq, or Mesopotamia, as it was known. Now, we've talked about it a few times, and I'd like to do a little series on it and the stories of Mesopotamia and how it all ties into conspiracy theories because of people like Zachariah Sitchin and that. But for this week, we're just gonna look into the dragons of the ancient Mesopotamians, of the ancient Iraqis. Now, the stories of ancient Iraqi dragons, it seems to connect the stories of angels as well with ancient Mesopotamia and with modern day. And the genetically modified animals that we seem to cover here every week, there's always something, an animal attached to a person, or people have been genetically spliced with animals or with aliens. It's a constant theme to the world around us that we keep witnessing. And we're trying to draw attention to here so that other people start to notice it. This hybridization of animals, though, but the dragons aren't the winged lizards in Mesopotamia that we've come to know, or even the snake-like creatures of Norse mythology. If you've played the God of War game, you'll know what I mean. In ancient Mesopotamia, the dragons are a lion and a bird crossed together. A lion at the front end and a bird at the back. Now, I did want something like, party in the front, business in the back, but just sounds fucking weird, doesn't it? Like, party lion don't make sense. But you could have, the party lion. You've got the party lion at the front and the business bird at the back. So you've got, that does actually work in a way, because it's like the idea of the party line is what you've got to tow. You've got to tow the party line, and then you've got the businesswoman behind you. He was like, don't say that, say this. Don't tell them about the hybridized animals. Don't be telling them about 50 Ways to Torture a Sloth and how it's now available for Patreon subscribers and how it's available for people to download from worldaroundyou.com, Etsy and Amazon, and able to buy as a paperback from worldaroundyou.com and Amazon. Don't be telling them that, just tell them about the party. Tell them what the party believes. And I don't know what the party believes, but I believe that these things seem a bit Griffin-y. The lions at the front and birds at the back seems very Griffin-y. These two animals, if you like, creatures, they get associated with the angels quite a lot, and we've covered that in a previous episode about angels, and I'm sure we've brought it up a few other times. Also, though, another creature that gets often associated with the angels and that, and the stories of dragons as well, which again is what ties this into a lot of things, and this is across all different cultures, is man, which is obvious because obviously it's humans telling the stories. But the weirder bit is cattle, or cows as they're also known, in the layman's term. They seem to cross quite a lot with the ancient American stuff. There's cattle with the angels. There's the angels as well were part cow, part man, part reptile, part bird. Cows get brought up a lot as well in the dragon stuff. And it seems weird, innit, that the legends of dragons would lend itself so heavily from Christianity. Or more correctly, would it be that Christianity and Judaism would lend itself so heavily on the base material of ancient Mesopotamian monsters? Now, there are tons of creatures in it around the world, easily fucking millions of them, animals and that, so it seems lazy to just pick cows, people, lions and birds out of nowhere each time. Why not a lizard? Why not a fish, or a dog, or even a whale, mate, or a fucking vaquetta? You ever heard of one of them? It's like a fucking fat dolphin, mate. Could be one of those, but it's not. It's always a cow, a man, a lion, or a bird. Now, there's got to be a reason, innit? It's like there's something that's trying to break through our consciousness, our subconsciousness, trying to tell us something very fucking important that I can't quite grasp. Like, like fucking we're all part of somebody else's brain in a coma, and the last thing that they did was read a story like the Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, except in their world it was called The Lion, the Witch and the Canary in a Cage or something. I don't know, it's not that creative, but you know what I mean. It's like we're all trapped there, and they're trying to tell us something like this isn't real life, innit? Like the doctors that used to somehow communicate with Sam Tyler in Life on Mars, and then with the lady that got called Bonnie by Gene Hunt in Ashes to Ashes, the telly, and that would communicate with him. And I think that's what's going on here. So maybe all of yous aren't real, I'm not sure, but or maybe I'm the doctor. Maybe I'm the doctor or the surgeon or the therapist in the real world, and what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get through to you. And it's very important that you listen. You need to listen. None of this is real, and you just need to work out why lions, birds, people and cows are everywhere. Because I've very rarely seen a lion personally, and I don't see that many birds anymore. I used to see a lot of chickens, but I did that to myself. Whereas nowadays I don't really see many birds. And I don't know if that's a thing. And then you had that whole birds of drones things. Is that like a rival group of therapists trying to get in on the action, being like, oh, that's not the way to fix him. Don't tell him that the birds are real. Tell him that the birds aren't real. Tell him it's a fake world. But then that fell apart because our immune system, or our brain, if you like, started to fight against that because it was breaking our reality. You know what I mean, or you know where I'm going. Now, another similarity between Mesopotamia and modern day is that the leaders were referred to as giant lizards. And nowadays, there are a lot of racial connotations thrown around with the word lizard, and racism, or at least the fear of being racist, seems like a great way to stop people having certain conversations. Conversations like, are all the important people in the world a breed of hybridized lizard people, or just extraterrestrial lizards wearing skin suits like the Ratsacocoricofallapatorians in Doctor Who, if you remember those, or I think they had another name. They were from Ratsacocoricofallapatori, or however the fuck you would say it. I think they were actually called the Slitheen, but they dress up in skin suits and they've got green skin, and they can shrink down inside it like they're a shapeshifter. But I'm going to be honest, guys, I'm pretty scared because it seems like the propaganda's gotten to me and all. I've decided against rattling off potential theories as to why certain demographics like to describe other people as lizards, just at the fear of sounding racist. But there is another story from ancient Mesopotamia. It doesn't involve Enki or Enlil or even Anu, which I thought was strange because, as far as I'm aware, they were the main gods of the area at the time. Instead, it was about this dragon god who managed to work his way up the incorporeal corporate ladder, should we say? starting off as a lackey. He started off as a labourer for the leader, for the brickie, who was the leader of the underworld. And then, but the brickie still had to answer to the foreman, who has to answer to the project manager, and his foreman was like a cabinet of gods, shall we say, for the leader of the underworld. And then all the way up to the big boss, the person who's put the money in, the CEO, the equivalent of the CEO of the ethereal realm, let's say. But he worked his way through all these different jobs, this dragon god, and he got himself to that position. He got himself there. So there is no glass ceiling in the ethereal realm, because everything's already see-through and it's already difficult enough. So they seem like that anybody can make it. Do you know what I mean? If you've just gone from a fledgling dragon god in the underworld, it's like fucking. It's like a game, mate. It's just like a game. You rank up, you go on RuneScape and you relax for a bit, and then you rank up some more, and you get in your bit of mindfulness, and you practice, and you practice other skills just in case your career doesn't take off. But your career does take off, and all of a sudden you're the leader of the underworld, and you're fucking using them batons that choir leaders and orchestral leaders, conductors use to conduct the people into doing what you want. But you're doing that with sulphur and brimstone and messing with people's minds to make them hear things in their heads, to make them think nothing's real. And then all of a sudden the other gods are like, I quite like what this guy's doing, we should have him up here. And that's what happened. I think he became the leader, and he went on to be known as Marduk, which is, for those of you that may want to look that up, is Marduk, who was known as the god for the Babylonians, which, if you're already reasonably well versed in conspiracy lore, you're going to have heard that name come up a lot anyway, because there are rich people nowadays that supposedly still worship Marduk to this day, which again ties in dragons to the past, to the present, to the future. Let's have a song. This is The Guilty Will Pay by Cannabis, King Crooked, Eric Sermon and Keith Murray. There was some similarities between the origin of the Marduk story and what I presume is Judaism, because it's referred to as a Hebrew story, which I feel like there's another word for Hebrew. Hebraic story. Hebrewish. Not Hebrewish, because it's either Hebrew or it isn't Hebrew, innit? But I don't know what the term is. But it was referred to as a Hebrew story. Maybe that is the term. It just doesn't sound right. But instead of Marduk partaking in a rather hostile takeover, it's about Yahweh, which does in some parts seem interchangeable with the word Marduk. And it's a story about the Leviathan, which I think is in the Old Testament of the Bible, which makes sense, because I think the Old Testament of the Bible is the equivalent of the Jewish Bible, which I think is actually called the Torah, unless the Torah is another holy book that's just associated with Judaism or their main thing, but they also have the Old Testament. I'm honestly not sure. But in fighting the Leviathan, which was a 7-headed snake, which again is a number that's going to come up quite a lot through the ages to do with dragons, it seems. Not only the world created by God in 7 days, it also seems to be a number that's associated with these massive fucking flying lizards. So it seems an important number. Someone's trying to get through the number 7 to us, which, if you add it with the other numbers that seem to come up a lot, like 9 and 3 within these dragon stories, which we'll get into a little bit later. But maybe that's the date that the accident happened to us. And the doctors or whatever are trying to get through to us that this happened on the... Maybe in that world there's 37 days in a month, or or it could be the year 7 or the year 37, and we're maybe playing through your life. This is your life. This is your life, and we're playing through that like fucking Parky, and he's giving you a run by run, minute by minute play of your life up until the moment where the horrific accident happens, and then you either wake up in that hospital bed or play through it all again. Like a plus run through of a game, where you've got some memory of what goes on and some of the tools you acquired in the last run, but some of them have been stripped away again. But it's going to be a little bit easier this time until you get there and break through. But in reality, this is all just happening over like a week period in a hospital bed. But to you, it's going to feel like at least another 15 years. But I've really gone off here. What were we on about? We were on about the Leviathan, the seven-headed Leviathan. Right, so the Leviathan story just seems like somewhat of a retelling of a Mesopotamian story I found of Marduk, which is, which was about this hostile takeover, which I mentioned a little bit. And the seven heads of the snake, I was thinking that could be a clever way to describe some form of ruling family. 7 people, all of the same blood, that's why there's 7 heads on the same beast, rather than an actual monster. There's a chance it could be allegorical. There's a chance, but, it might not be. There's a good chance it could be literal. Maybe the snake itself, though, if we're going to go down the allegorical sense, maybe that snake isn't to do with people, but maybe it's a group. Like in Marvel, you've got Hydra in it with all the heads, and you chop one head off, and that's replaced by 2 people doing the same job, and it spreads. And you can easily imagine it being the 7 people in charge of the board of a business, or board members of the universe, if you really wanted to push it, seeing as though defeating them means that you get to become the autocratic leader of the known universe, which, as it happens, is exactly what happened. Yahweh is said to have defeated the Leviathan before completely overhauling the universal order, which seems like a really fucking clever way to say that some powerful or at least intelligent entity led some form of revolution, which from memory seems quite similar to the story of Enki and Enlil in a way, where one of them decided that I don't think this is right, that we're making slaves and we're turning them into sex slaves and fuck dolls. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And the other one got pissed off, like, remember who your boss is, remember who you are, you're not one of these. It seems similar, innit? It's a similar story. Now, that number 7 that we mentioned, it seems important, innit? It does, but I can't work out why. But it gets mentioned again in some dragon lore in ancient Persian stories that I was looking through, which, for those of you that don't know, Persia went on to become Iran. Now, Iraq and Iran are very, very maybe not influential, may not be the right word, but very important places in like world politics, it seems. Places where there's wars going on, and are we there is it got something to do with dragons, maybe? I don't know. But in ancient Persian stories, there was the 7 labours of Rostam, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong, where the 3rd labour involved Rostam and his horse fighting and killing some form of invisible dragon. Now, if you imagine a board or the leaders of the universe being the invisible hand, if you like, as it's referred to now, you could easily refer to that as the invisible dragon if you're going to be allegorical. Now, you probably already know where I'm going with this, but the reptilians, right? They're said to inhabit this other dimension in the same space as our own, which, in a way, that would also mean that they're invisible rather than just the invisible hand. But maybe I'm just seeing something that isn't there. Now, I did find 7 relating to dragons again, but that was in Indian stories of dragons. There was a fight between what I think was a god and a dragon, which had been causing a drought, stopping the rain and that, and acting like a fucking... I don't know was it a plague? Was one of the plagues drought? But he's stopping the water and that, causing a drought through the land. And then defeating the dragon allows the 7 streams to flow, which if you really wanted to squint at certain depictions of the Norse realms, you could see 7 potential pathways between all the realms, like 7 roads between the realms, if you look at it in a certain way, and you was to use maybe, let's say, certain illustrations and certain artist interpretations of how they would be placed. If you was to put them in a 3D space, there'd be probably 7 pathways, which seems, again, quite similar. And you defeat the dragons, and then all of a sudden the pathways to the realms all open up, which may have something to do with chakras as well, I'm not sure. Now, could this be what it means? Could it mean that 7 pathways between like Hell, Midgard, Asgard, Jotunheim, and whatever the fuck the others were called? I can't remember the other 3. Oh well, actually there's 9 realms, isn't there, but 7 paths. Could this be why there's so many references to 7? Because there's also that dragon that I mentioned before in Norse mythology, which I can't remember the name of, that protects the edges of at least Midgard and keeps in the waters, if you like. And Christianity has the idea of the firmament that keeps in the waters, and maybe that water can't spread out. And water as well will come up later about dragons as well. And maybe this dragon protects other realms, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure though there was a story about Thor fighting the dragon as well, which would almost tie it into the Iranian story as well, because there's the sky god, if you like. And if you recognise the idea of an important mythical character performing labours, you've just heard about the 7 labours of Rostam, which I mentioned about 2 minutes ago. You've also got Hercules, who performed 12 labours, right? Which is a handful more, 5 more, maybe, 5 more than Rostam. But Hercules was the son of the main god, just like Jesus was the son of God, and just like Thor was the son of the main god. There's a few steps to get there in between, but if you were to make comparison charts for the stories, I bet they'd all be relatively similar. You'd be able to tick quite a lot of boxes in each one. And if you tally them up, you'd probably be like, oh, this matches with this one and this one, but not that one, but these 3 match with the first one and these 2 match with the last one, if you get what I mean. And it all gets a bit stranger and all. Do you remember Quetzalcoatl? The South American deity that just keeps popping up out of nowhere, that gave the knowledge of agriculture to the people over there. Well, they were also known, those creatures, whatever Quetzalcoatl was, they were also known as the winged serpents, and he was, well, more specifically, Quetzalcoatl was known as the winged serpent, which I keep telling you, and you already know, right? Which, now that we're doing dragons, seems synonymous with most depictions of dragons that we've seen, but that's not exactly where I'm going with this. The important bit is the agriculture. Getting back to that Indian story I mentioned, after the 7 streams have opened and been allowed, to flow again, the end of the drought is actually represented by cattle. Now, everywhere else in the world, I would say that cattle represented agriculture, but initially that's what I thought anyway, and it seemed wrong with India, because I thought, Indians don't eat beef, and to a certain degree they don't, or, at least a strong proportion of Indians don't eat beef. It's not an Indian thing, it's more of I think it's a Hindu thing. They don't eat beef. But they don't half love the fucking milk, cheese and yogurts, the Indians, which I never knew. They fucking love a bit of dairy over there. So the cattle do represent agriculture. It's literally agriculture. They received agriculture for opening up the 7 streams, for defeating the dragon. Just like the South Americans received agriculture, but South Americans received agriculture in the way of corn. So, could the gods, whatever they may be, or at least what pose themselves to us as gods, be a creature that wants to destroy the dragons? Were the dragons a good thing and humanity was tricked into defeating them? Then, through popular culture over millennia and religion, people were made to believe that reptiles were evil because for somebody, maybe somebody went around the world and killed all the friendly reptiles. Maybe we used to have snakes that were friendly and would cuddle up to you for warmth rather than squeezing you, but someone went around and killed all those so that the aggressive ones could take over and the venomous ones could linger around and become more dangerous, and then they spread lies of, evolution and things like that to make us not realise that someone's gone around killing all the massive lizards that were friendly, or just the temperament of like a Rottweiler or something, like a soft dog, like a fucking retriever kind of thing, but they're just dopey things like a Great Dane, or the smaller ones like cats, or fucking like Dimorphodons, which would just be like budgies now. But they got rid of them because they were like, no, we can't have people knowing about these. We'll make up a thing saying they used to be dinosaurs, so no one believes in the dragons. And then what we'll do is we'll develop fossils and we'll lie. We'll lie about evolution. We'll make up this thing called evolution. We'll promote this guy with a beard because beards are going to be big again. Beards always come back round, so they'll always listen to him. But we're drifting away. Could the agriculture that got introduced, could that be a way for aliens to terraform our planet? Could they be using agriculture to do that? We know that like paddy fields, not where the Irish developed. It means where rice grows. That's supposed to give out loads of methane, and cows are supposed to give out loads of methane. Corn probably affects the environment as well. And we know for a fact anyway that cows are supposedly responsible for a lot of methane gases, because that's what vegans tell us. And if we're going to believe anything that vegans do say, and if I am going to perpetuate any of the myths spread by vegans, that's going to be probably the only one. That's not to say I condone it. I don't believe in their message. I don't believe in them. I don't know if I do believe that cows are responsible for a lot of the methane gases, to be honest. But could the reptilians, right, who've become spiteful towards humans, be whispering in the ears, like the invisible hand and the whispering that we heard before, with the business lady behind, if you like, behind the party now being the vegans. Could they be whispering in the ears of any willing spiritualist to force them into becoming vegan, because the spiritualists have found a way to listen through the into the other dimension, and they're using them as a conduit to destroy the very infrastructure built into the world by these gods or aliens that once helped us defeat the dragons, so that the dragons can once again gain control? Or are the dragons or reptilians actually evil? It's hard to tell. But let's have a song. This is They Don't Bang by Sibo the Chill and Gangster. Do you know what you'd look good in? Mothman with his cock out t-shirt, mate. £25 on my website plus postage. It's one of the best things to wear to listen to this, and get yourself a little U as well. So it's a little cuddly sheep with a t-shirt on it that says World Around You's podcast. Let everyone know that comes into your bedroom that you sit there with a stuffed sheep and listen to what seems to be quite a weird guy that normally spends his days cutting up rats and spends his nights sat in a cupboard under the stairs, frantically panicking that there's perception filters all around the world. That's your choice, though. I'll let you get back on with the show. We're not going to really stick to what I think would be chronological order, because I can't quite get my head around it. So we're going to nip through Europe now on our whistle-stop tour of dragons through the ages. And we encounter a number that we've already encountered. Not a number of dragons that we've already seen. I mean, literally the number 3. Except this time, it comes up twice. It was a story about the gods of the sky, aliens, or Thor. Thor was a sky god. Quetzalcoatl, winged serpent, sky god, alien. And these gods of the sky give cattle to a man known as the Third Man, which I'm thinking that Third Man stuff relates to the Third World. Not like what we're told Africa is and that, but what Native Americans have and what they believe, or at least some of them. I think we've touched on it briefly in the past. I don't know a lot about it, so I don't want to delve into it too much, but I'm not sure if they all believe it. I know some do. They believe that we're in the Fourth World at the minute. So maybe during the third iteration of the world, which for the analogy that we're using throughout the episode, maybe our third run through of our life before we can figure out how to wake up out of this eternal coma of a night or nightmare that we seem to be stuck in. Where the dragons were defeated at the end, and the aliens or the sky gods, which could be the surgeons, gave the gift of cattle, which once again fits in with the story of Quetzalcoatl and his gift of agriculture. But in this story from Europe, they say the Third Man gets the cattle, then the three-headed serpent steals them. Now there's that 3 again. So maybe the end of the Third World didn't get the response they needed. It didn't work. The dragon comes back and takes the cattle away. We need the cattle. The cattle obviously represent something. Agriculture must represent something important to waking up out of this dream. But we can't forget that. So the dragon took it away again. And then the Fourth World began. Just as a possibility. Just throwing it out there. But what you've got to remember is that with the three-headed serpent, it's got 6 eyes, so I don't know if that means anything to anyone out there. If you want to let me know what that means. Either way, though, this Triton or Tristan, something like that, Tristan, it might have been, whatever he was called, he goes with the humans and kills the dragon and then gets the cows back. Now, again, bringing up the vegans, could the vegans be tied to the dragons? To the lizard people trying to take away our cows? If I walk down the street, right, slapping ice creams out of the hands of children, I'd be considered antisocial, cruel, a dickhead, basically. But when a group of semi-well-organised upper-middle-class people sporting a vampiric complexion go about campaigning to take away frubes from 5-year-olds at schools because it's unhealthy and it's not your milk and all this shite, it's seen as a positive. So is it just because they've got the backing of the mysterious dragons, the board, the multiple-headed beast, and once again, are the cows a defence against these invisible predators who control the weather? Vegans like to say they're also thinking about the environment. They don't like the hot weather and that because it's not good for them, because they're not getting everything that they need to be able to, manufacture the right things in their body. But dragons, right, are associated with bringing rainfall a lot of the time. So it does kind of make sense that the vegans would be in cahoots with the dragons or the ethereal race of reptilian vampires that are knocking about on the cusp of our dimension, just on the edge, knocking, can I come in? You got to say no, innit? Because obviously the vampires, you don't want to accept them in. But the vegans might be accepting them, listening to the little witterings in their ears. And, go to worldaroundyou.com. And if you fall asleep listening to this episode when you wake up, you should go to worldaroundyou.com and order yourself one of each digital book and leave a nice little donation on the website and maybe buy some stuff for yourself. But the vampires aren't saying that. The reptilian vampires, they're saying, get them to get rid of the cows. We need them cows gone. It doesn't make sense, innit? Now, just a quick note. We're a little bit more on numbers, if you like. I've not got too much on it, but in the story of Beowulf, or the poem Beowulf, there was this dragon that gets killed, and Beowulf went into battle with 12 other warriors, which seems, again, pretty Christ-like, and again, sort of ties back in with all the other stories I mentioned earlier on. But let's have a song. This is The Book of Life by Murs, R.A. the Rugged Man, and Justin Cohen. If you're enjoying the shows, could you do us a favour and leave a nice little 5-star rating or a review wherever you're listening to it? I know you can do it on Apple and Good Pods and places like that, but you can now do it on Spotify and all. Apparently it'll help me get up the charts and that'll reach more people. Anyway, I'll let you get back into it. Scientists, where was I? Scientists don't really pay much attention to myths in their explanation of dragons, though some of them do acknowledge that these creatures did exist, but they say they weren't magical, they weren't fire-breathing, probably not from outer space, even though we found bits of them on the moon, which, I think that's actually the first mention of the moon for the episode so far. Now that I've mentioned it, I'm probably going to fucking open the floodgates. There's the flood. We've spoke about the flood, although we spoke about a bit of a flood earlier on, I think. Bit of rain anyway. But now that I've mentioned the moon and the flood, we all know what's going to keep happening now. But the scientists claim that the dragons weren't magical or fire-breathing. What they claim is that they were a breed of migratory crocodiles or alligators, apparently, which is mental, really, because most migratory species that I'm aware of are birds, and if you read Jurassic Park, because I've read Jurassic Park, fucking good book, Michael Crichton, obviously, who doesn't know that, but in that, the dinosaurs are migratory, they're like birds, but these migratory birds, they're like migratory crocodiles, that's still pretty much just building the mental image of winged lizards in people's heads, innit? If you say, it's a migratory crocodile, you're not thinking of like a herd of crocodiles racing across the savannah. You're thinking of a flock of crocodiles flying overhead, shitting out solid fish, destroying everything beneath them. Everything just smells like a swamp. That's the image in my head, anyway. Now, another way that they say these winged lizards did exist, but they weren't called dragons, is when they try to make us believe in dinosaurs. Now, we learned ages ago in the Did Dinosaurs Exist episode that a load of fossils were actually not real, and they're still not real, they're fake, and a good portion of those are actually made in a factory in China. But they say that there were pteranodons, dimorphodons, who got I mentioned before, the little bird-like ones, and even a massive flying dinosaur, which you're going to recognise the name of, Quetzalcoatlus, which is like Quetzalcoatl, but with us at the end. And it's very similar, isn't it, to Quetzalcoatl, the winged serpent that gave the ancient Americans agriculture. It all connects, man. There's fucking connections everywhere. And the fossil factories aren't the only thing that ties China in with the belief of dragons either. A lot of people believe that dragons stem from China because, popular culture and that. And that's not true. There are references to dragons in ancient Egypt in their stories of, I want to say Atep, I think it was, or Apep, I think it's the same guy. It's like a sort of an underworld kind of creature, and I think actually we spoke about them, innit? We did speak about them, but it's these references in ancient Egyptian stories. It's not even like they disappeared from the zeitgeist after Mesopotamia and reappeared in China, because you've got that in-between bit of ancient Egypt where they had the same stories of them then. So what's going on there with history? What's going on why do these stories just travel around the world in this weird snaking round the world. Do you know what? It's bizarre, isn't it? It was Apep was like a massive snake, which I think Ra had to fight with that kind of half dog creature that he was knocking about with him, the bad guy. And you'd have to fight him each night to reclaim the sun. That was like the story about it. Well, we covered that in the ancient Egyptian creationism episode. There's a load of Chinese stuff about dragons, so I figured we'd just get straight into China. Some of it does seem allegorical. Like how only the emperor was allowed to sport the dragon motif on his polo shirts when he'd go out to the pub, and no one else was allowed dragons on their wallpaper and that in their houses, only the emperor, and not even on the curtains or out like that. And he was the only guy in the entire country to be allowed anything to do with dragons, which you could argue that he was the only person allowed to know the quote-unquote secret, or more specifically, he was hoarding the hidden knowledge of the lizard people, the extra-dimensional entities that seem to plague our dimension now more than ever. Or could the term dragon have just meant forbidden knowledge, the knowledge of the outside world, the knowledge of the Roman world and things like that? The last thing the Emperor of China would want is his people knowing that there's an ever-growing army out there over in Europe and North Africa that's using an army of robotic men, like we discovered in the Robots and Automatons episode, to take over Europe and planning on trying to take over more of the world. He doesn't want the Chinese people knowing that. They've got enough going on. They've got to try and build their own empire and that and keep going and expanding so that they can meet the Romans in the middle to fight dragons against robots maybe, which is then Pacific Rim, realistically. And Evangelicis. Quite a lot of stories actually, the kaiju against robots. Maybe that's wasn't where I was going. Pretty weird though that's a thing. That is a thing in the zeitgeist. The Asian monsters against what seemed to be American technology, robots, Romans. We could, that's the historical thing. Was the Romans had robots, tin men and that. Anyway, another weird thing about the dragons and the Fae and the dragon stories. I'm getting ahead of myself. The dragons seem to be similar to the stories of Greys and the Fae on it, but these stories seem to be what the Chinese see historically. The dragons, just like nowadays, people, almost since Aleister Crowley, people have seen the Greys or the aliens, and before that they were seeing the Fae, which we've covered in this, or if not in an episode of Truth Seeking somewhere a little bit. But there will be an episode on the Fae when I find that book that I really want to read. It's got a picture on the front of a monster taking a mask off. I can't remember what it's called. The dragons, though. My point is, maybe Chinese people see dragons in place of where we would have seen the Fae historically, or where we would now see aliens. From the metaphorical perception filters, if you like, are causing that in our brain. Maybe we're not in a coma. I'm losing where I was, right? So we'll just get into these Chinese stories. So a lot of these Chinese stories seem to revolve around women becoming pregnant at the hands of the dragons, which seems very similar to the story of Mary getting one thrown up her by God at the hands of the otherwise invisible angel Gabriel. And an angel is yet another winged creature, and in many stories is a creature that has both wings and scales, and again, half monster, half person. It's hybridization, different creatures melded together in the mixing pot of this, in this sense, the womb of a Chinese woman. But there's loads of alien abduction stories nowadays about women becoming pregnant from them. So how is this any different other than the avatars, if you like, doing the impregnating of the Chinese women back then and of the other women now? We're just wearing different skins like on Fortnite or something, Maybe this is why rich people are getting richer from adding skins to games. Nothing in the game changes that you play and the character just looks different. Maybe the first time this happened, there might have been advantages to different characters being used, like, in Mortal Kombat they've got different moves, or when you'd play as Nick Nack in the old James Bond games and you were harder to shoot, or when you'd play as Oddjob in Nightfall, Night Summer. Anyway, you'd play as Oddjob and you'd get that hat to throw, and it's like a one-shot kill. But now they're just all the same base character, just with different clothes. It does a different weapon, but it does the same damage. It looks the same. Different skin colours, like you can have the usuals of black, white, brown, but then you could have blue, green, pink, yellow, anything, or mad hair and that, or any type of creature or a cartoon character. Again, the information is right there in front of you, but for whatever reason, no one's looking at it. Now, could these dragon-born children just be a way to tell us about hybrids? Could it? The animal-human hybrids that I think are being possibly made in the moon, or whatever the moon actually is. Maybe the moon is the portal above us, the doorway to this other dimension or other world, and that's where these creatures come from, and there's maybe like a crossover period, a void in between where we can interact with one another. Maybe that's why we went to the moon, to try and make a bit of a trade agreement. You give us some stronger DNA and we'll give you some slaves back, because you used to come here and make slaves, so we'll give you some of them back, and a bit of an exchange. But really, we're probably just going to lose anyway. Now, these half dragon, half people kind of make sense in a way, because it's the same story, isn't it, over and over again. I can't remember which religion it is, but I'm sure there's actually an Eastern religion that has a story about the moon being some form of egg for a mythical creature. I remember that somewhere in the back of my head, which could also mean that there's a story about the moon not being a rock, which is very on brand for the show. Now, whilst we're thinking of other stories that come up again and again, there's also a Chinese dragon that caused the Great Deluge, a flood, and that was a black dragon called Anavel, which has got evil in there. So, a bit of foreshadowing there, really, on the part of the dragon parents who birthed that dragon. Plus, in films, like when it was like knights and that, usually the Black Knight would be evil, and the knight in shining armor would be the good guy. There's normally a little foreshadowing thing in that, in it, really. And ninjas are seen as aggressives in films, and they're all like clad in black. But I mean, the dragon couldn't help the way it was made, and it couldn't help its name. But it didn't fucking live up to its name, and it seems weird because that they would have this story of a flood, because there's loads of mountain ranges in China. So why would they even worry about floods? Because they're pretty high up, as far as I know. I did find some stories as well, some Chinese stories that skirt around the concept of the Anunnaki, or at least of a lizard-like creature, aka a dragon, but coming to Earth and interfering with the native monkeys of the planet. I mean, I've embellished it a little bit there, but the story is actually about the monkeys of Earth stumbling into the cave of a dragon, and that dragon breathed on those monkeys, and then monkeys then grew into humans, which could easily be looked at as the cave being a dark place, maybe some form of different dimension that they happen to just stumble into. Maybe because of the stoned ape theory, they started eating mushrooms, the monkeys and apes were hallucinating, seeing these creatures for the first time, and then the creatures were like, hang about, you can see us as well. Well, why don't you just do this? Why don't you just do that? What about this? What if you burn things? Or would you like to burn stuff? I bet you'd love to burn stuff. And the monkeys are just there going, hoo, 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 because they're fucking holding the hand too close to the fire. And then there's a punishment. The real, true God made monkeys then have to speak like that for the rest of eternity as a little punishment for interfering with something they didn't understand. And these stories, now I think you could relate that dragon breath to maybe some form of radiation. Maybe the radiation that gets emitted from spaceships that visited the Earth. Maybe radiation emitted from the machines used by the Anunnaki's original slave race to mine gold, and that's why they were so-called dragons, were in the cave to even start with. Maybe we were just doing a check to make sure they're doing the work. And I think it was Plato. He had a thing about a cave and all, to say that we live in a cave looking at shadows on a wall. So, I mean, this could be linked to that explanation of the world, if you imagine that the vision of the dragon is the mental imprint left by the potentially psychic, vampiric reptilians that we seem to be interfering. We seem to be dealing with, is a better word than interfering. They're interfering with us. But maybe because of that, we see in our heads, we see them as mythical monsters, so that we don't actually see them as what they are. We may never know. Let's have a song. This is Devlin with Popular Fashion. Now, it's long been thought by some people that China's ahead of the curve against the rest of the world from a technological standpoint. And could this be why they have all these stories of dragons controlling the rain? Is this some sort of nod to what would feel like a technologically primitive harp weapon, or the HARP weapons system, because apparently it might be more than one machine now. For those of you who don't know, like a means of controlling the weather, or maybe it's a way to say that there are creatures in the skies that control our weather, but nowadays it's explained away with HARP, because now we're moving away from myths and things like that, and we're trying to use science rather than using magic to explain everything. We use this term of science and technology to explain everything. So instead of saying the dragons control the weather, the gods control the weather, HARP controls the weather. It's a machine that seeds clouds with aluminium or directs the sun rays to certain points. That's how the weather comes, because maybe we still don't understand what the weather is or how it happens or anything like that. And these folklore stories about heavenly creatures controlling the weather just seem to be everywhere. And now there's that modern version with harps controlling the weather. If you remember back in an old episode of Truth Seeking, me and Jimmy spoke about some Slavic gods that could also control the weather. I think that was quite an early on one, probably before episode 10, I think. But there was them, they were like the air gods around the mountains and that, and they controlled the weather. So there's always these stories of creatures or entities or forces controlling the weather. Now, we're going to take a little step away from China and look at Korea. Because there are certain stories from Korea where if you go to Korea and you tilt your head to the side and squint a little bit, they seem to look a lot like the others. Like the Korean stories of dragons introducing agriculture seem like the others. That it seems very similar yet again to the stories of Quetzalcoatl. Weirdly though, what we can do is we can tie in some Korean stories about dragons to the Hollow Earth and all. According to some Koreans, dragons live in undersea realms and they're ruled by the Dragon King, which all kind of sounds a lot like the stories of Atlantis, or more specifically, the stories of the Hollow Earth and what I think was called the One True King, or whatever it was he was called, the God King. But seeing as we're in Eastern Asia, we're already there, it'd be rude not to nip on over to Japan. And Japan's got some beliefs about dragons, because there's now supposedly Buddhist stories which seem to envelop older stories about dragons, but there are some Japanese stories about dragons, and most of the stories tell us that the dragons can be bargained with, or at least appeased when they're given metals, presumably precious metals. I'm imagining gold, if I'm honest, a lot like the Anunnaki, and the stories of the Anunnaki say that they come back semi-frequently and come back to collect our gold. Others, though, have hypothesised that that's actually a lie. These people believe that the precious resource these creatures are after is our water. And surprisingly, there's loads of stories about dragons being tied to water in Japan and all. More specifically, they can be summoned with water. So, is that all that water is? A way to allow the extra-dimensional entities entry into our bodies via water? Or does this tie my theories about running water in our sewerage systems together with yet another red thread on the conspiracy board? I've often hypothesised to you that the sewers only exist to collect all of the gold that gets removed from food through our perfectly attuned digestive tracts because of alchemy, if you like. It gathers it all in one place and then sorts it out for our ethereal overlords, whatever they may be. And I always overlook the idea of the water coming back around the pipes for us to drink again. And this kind of helps bring that in, because by using the water in our homes, it then gives the dragons, or the lizards, or the greys, or the fae, the ethereal shape-shifting alternative dimensional entities, if you like, it gives them a sort of lifeline, a sort of way in, or you could, if you want to look at it like a potholer using a rope to find their way out of the cave when they've finished. And it allows them to, in the same way that the potholer can explore that cave safely, knowing he can return back to where he's come from, maybe it allows these ethereal entities to explore our world by tying themselves to us with water and our homes and like I say, our bodies, so that they can get a greater understanding of our world, our dimension, and maybe help them influence our world. Maybe that is why there's always been so much stuff on TV about introducing water to other countries. If water is so necessary for, sustaining life, and without it everybody dies, then how have all of these people all around the world survived for as long, if not longer, than what we have? Why are we all really introducing water to these far-off distant lands? Could it be for dragons? But that's a question for another time. A question this week, for me, was what numbers come up with dragons. Is there a repetition of numbers? And we looked at 3 and we looked at 7 a lot earlier on. But in Eastern culture, the number 9 seems to come up a lot. Korean dragons have got 81 scales on the back, which is 9 rows of 9. And if you really wanted to tie it in with other numbers, you could realise that 81 is 27 threes, which has a 7, but the number 2 before it, which means if you really wanted to, there's the potential there for 2 more 7s to add to our list. Or you could add the 2 and the 7 and get yet another 9 for the ever-growing pile of 9s related to dragons. 27 is also very, very close to 28. Which is the amount of days that are supposed to be in a month, at least according to George Eastman, the creator of the Kodak camera. But if it isn't just George that's thinking this, because we've now learned since that I think it's Ethiopia and other countries live from this 28-day-a-month calendar system. So what if this knowledge of Eastman's calendar is a lie? What if it's a half-truth? It managed to get out, it seeped out, so they did a bit of damage control and changed it to 28 days so that people wouldn't realise that it all relates back to 27 and therefore 9 and therefore dragons, aka the lizard people, right? And there was also a story of a samurai that wanted to kill a dragon, so obviously this is in Japan. So he prayed for 8 days, and then on the 9th day he was able to go and kill the dragon. This seems like the story of creation, but kind of in reverse. Stuff happened for X amount of days, and then something different happened on one of the days. But instead of creating for 6 days, he prayed for 8, and instead of resting for 1, he killed the dragon for 1. Maybe, though, this is all just clutching at straws. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it does all tie together in a nice, neat little bow like how I'm seeing it in my head. Something that surprisingly didn't come up in my research, though, was why dragons get associated with wizards all the time. So maybe we'll save that for another show. I'd like to do a King Arthur one, and maybe Merlin and that, and dragons, and that sort of idea of dragons and myths and legends, you know. One thing that is worth mentioning, though, that I don't think I have so far, is that in a lot of stories, these dragons breathe fire, or they spit venom of some sort. And this seems another way to tie them into being something to do with aliens. Because I was thinking about it, right? Or maybe these creatures from a different dimension, because, yet again, the angel stuff, the chariots of fire. What if these spacecraft, or dimensional crafts, were that big that they looked like a shuttle re-entering the Earth's atmosphere on one end, so you've got all that fire around the tip of it at one end, where they appeared over the countries, and these countries started with the angel stories. All these creatures came from a ball of fire, you know, for example, in the Middle East, where a lot of angel stories come from. And these creatures' machines were large enough that their exhausts could be seen in China, and they dripped fuel from the pipes, like some exhausts do, which destroyed the ground and the property beneath it. It may even explain why Eastern Asia ties dragons to water so much. Maybe the dimensional creatures never intended to damage the planet or the water, and maybe they repaired or replaced the water, or took the contaminated water away and replaced it with synthetic water, but they measured it wrong, or maybe didn't account for something unforeseen to them due to being in a different dimension. And maybe that's the reason why people think the aliens want our water. Maybe they come back to check on it because they know it isn't exactly what was originally here, so they replace it, or maybe they top it up every now and then, almost as if we're living in some form of intergalactic fish tank. And that's all we've got time for this week, guys. So don't forget me new books on Amazon and my website and Etsy. Buy it from Amazon and Etsy if you want to get me up the rankings on there. Otherwise, just get it off my website, worldaroundyou.com. It's called 50 Ways to Torture a Sloth. I reckon you'll probably like it. It's a picture book this time. Join me Patreon and all if you want to get access to that and all my other books as ebooks. Patreon.com/worldaroundyou. Also, if you do join that for the £3 or the $3.50 and up option, you'll get access to all of my books on there as well. And exclusive episodes of every other Thursday. You'll get an episode where I read the messages, and not the messages, but mostly the comments left by the old perverts on my Facebook page. So that's got to be worth a listen for you. It's got to be worth, a couple of quid a month to hear them, and I'll commentate on them a bit, and the angry ones as well. And I guess that'll do. I'll see you in a bit, guys. Don't forget my new book, 50 Ways to Torture a Sloth.